Hey, Mom, how's it going?
I'm having a fantastic day, Lindsay. We are back and at it. First podcast of the new year. I'm super, super pumped. How about you? How's your day going?
It's good. It's good. Kicking up for the new year. This year was a weird one because we had that weird, 2 days. And then now when we're recording this, we're in the first week of January. So it feels good to be back in the swing of things, back home after all, holiday travel. Feels nice. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too. Well, I thought we'd change things up a little bit if you don't mind. I think this year we're going to start highlighting what we do a little differently. And I thought it would be a little fun if we played a little trivia game. So, with you and our amazing guest today, Mr. Charles McDade, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much. Absolutely.
I thought before we jump in and intro you formally, I thought I would ask you guys a trivia question and just test your knowledge about all things. And, if you're buying an agency, if you're selling an agency, I thought this might be a fun way to get some information out there. So you guys ready?
These can be.
All right, here we go. What do you guys think are some of the ways that an acquisition can be slowed down? It's multiple choice. So I'm going to give you some options here. Okay. Number 1, inaccurate financial statements. Number 2, unclear ownership of a book of business. Number 3, unreasonable expectations of a buyer and seller. And number 4, all of the above. I'll do the little Jeopardy thing. You guys can think.
Well, I think all of those are pretty bad things. So I think the answer is very likely all of the above. But I think the one that's probably the most, that I see the most from the network side is unclear ownership of business, because people will sell their books not understanding that they actually can't move it or it's locked somewhere for a certain amount of time. But I think all of those are very likely to delay an acquisition.
What do you think, Charles?
That felt a little like either marriage or an acquisition. I think all of those are reasons why maybe a marriage gets slowed down as well, right? Like if I'm unclear of ownership, aka are you currently married? Are you thinking about getting married? Are you with someone else? So I think that, to your point, the answer is all of the above. But I felt very specifically attacked on if this was a first date conversation. It's like, no, hey, let's clarify these things because everything gets slowed down otherwise.
Maybe those are some good questions to be asking on a first date when you're in an acquisition talk.
No doubt. I mean, it's kind of funny that you say that, Charles, because you'd be surprised how many people get way down the road and there's a producer-owned book of business in the mix that we just have forgotten to highlight or mentioned or whatever. And you're like, hold up. Can't actually sell what you don't own. So, I mean, you guys are both spot on. That's definitely one that is a challenge, but they all are a challenge. If you have super messy financials, let me tell you, people don't know what to count on. And therefore, not only will it slow it down, sometimes the deal will get pretty discounted because it's uncertain. As a buyer, I don't really have good data. So therefore, I'm going to discount it and protect my risk a little bit. And, unreasonable expectations, I think, slows everything down in marriage, in life, in acquiring, and anything, right? So I'm with you on that one for sure. For sure. Anyway, well, I thought that might be a fun way to just break the ice. But Charles, welcome to the show. For those people who have not met you, please give a little intro. Tell us about your agency, the name of your agency, where you're located, and a little bit about what brought you to insurance.
Okay. How y'all doing? My name's Charles McDade. Thank you so much, Carey. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for the chance to talk and share a little story. This is going to be fun. So I'm an agency owner. I work down here in Houston, Texas, where the hard market is ever so present. And my agency is McDade Insurance. We are a bespoke agency that focuses on homeowners, primarily because I got my start in insurance back in 2010 with Liberty Mutual and had a lot of fun there. But specifically, again, my agency is McDade Insurance and we're out here in the Houston area. So thank y'all again for the opportunity. I got started in insurance because I was spiteful with my grandfather. And isn't that how all of us kind of have a story to kick off for insurance? Mine was purely just to prove him wrong and have a little bit of fun with it. So I got started because my grandfather, he owned a business that directly correlated itself with NASA, and they were doing some cyber security work, all that good stuff, and they were actually contracted with them. Well, I went to school for professional sales and got out and wanted to help the family business. And I was able to find out kind of quickly that my grandpa was a little bit difficult to deal with. There's a certain way some entrepreneurs want to have their business done, and he'd had a good long failed relationship with a bunch of different salespeople, where he had this great idea. And I mean, you can let me know, Carey, later on if this is a good way to hire salespeople or not, to pay them all of their money as a base because there's such a good salesperson, it lowers your downside. Let me fast forward this. The company did go bankrupt.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably not a good choice. Yeah,
well, he probably doesn't work there. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna lock out my baseline by paying him a good chunk. Well, maybe 6 months before this occurred is when I graduated, before he actually filed for bankruptcy. So instead of telling me the company was in dire straits because I would be the type of person that would throw myself into that fire, my grandpa decided to poke me a little bit by saying, "In what way are you even qualified to work at this company?" And we got into this back and forth of, I'm sorry, what school did you even go to? And I was like, okay, well, first off, I played football. You were at my games, sir. Okay, like it's one of those awkward moments. Yeah, like I have the T-shirt. You were there. You're currently wearing the T-shirt, right? So he sat there, and I immediately had this feeling of like confusion and a bit of unhappiness in this conversation. But then he looks at me and he says, listen, I made the mistake before by offering too high of a base. So I think that the best way to go for you is no base at all. And I sat there and I said, so wait a minute, everyone else that has come into this office, you've maneuvered with, you've worked with. But for me, the conversation is to set me free to the wolves. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, okay. So I shot him the double finger and I got up and I left.
Yep.
Boy.
After that, I had a friend of mine, Adam Rust, that played football with me in high school that had known me from the marketing professional sales side of conversation. He went to school over here at U of H, and they have a good marketing professional sales school as well, because I actually went to school at Nichols in Louisiana. And while online perusing Facebook or perusing social media, he ended up seeing that I was looking for a job, and that I was also someone that had been through a program similar to his. So he offered me the chance of working at Liberty Mutual as an intern. And I jumped on the opportunity to prove that my grandpa didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And that is my way of being able to get into insurance, which is all funs and games until someone gets their feelings hurt.
Heck yeah.
So Charles, how long did you work at Liberty Mutual before starting McDade then?
I worked there for 7 years before I kicked everything off. And then the beautiful part of being a captive agent is the non-compete that used to have to get dealt with. So there was a 2-year non-compete, and some of the larger companies, when you are a more successful agent, I had won every award I could at Liberty at the time, whether it ends up being Rookie of the Year countrywide, Zone Rookie, top 5% of the company, regardless of tenure. All of those things were a part of the conversation that I had dealt with prior. And at the same time, that makes you more likely to get kind of sued and have some worries than otherwise. So I took 2 years away from insurance to kind of insulate myself from that. And to be blunt, I've been drinking the insurance Kool-Aid for a little bit of time. Sometimes you forget that the way that insurance is ran is a little bit archaic, right? And is a little bit behind the times. And being able to take 2 years to where I was able to focus on different pieces of the industry was huge, just as far as for my development. And the end of my time with Liberty was late 2017. And I officially started my agency in, I guess, grand opening was June 2020. So I did give them the correct 2-year time frame, although I didn't know that COVID was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Charles, I love that you talked about your grandfather and entrepreneurs, and we all make tons of mistakes. Like, the reality is, we're all just trying to figure this thing out. Whether you're running a consulting business like me, or an agency like yours, or a business like his, there's a lot of things that hindsight is 2020. I bet your grandfather had this 100%. Like, when I look in the rearview mirror, I can see this decision, maybe not so much. But I'd love to, if someone asked me that question, I can tell you the hindsight's 2020 all day long. But someone who's listening to this podcast and is like, man, he started an agency with COVID right there, with tons of experience in the industry, but it's a tough time to do that. And then to have COVID, then the great resignation or great reshuffle or whatever you want to call it, and then the hard market, like, it's been a run. There's no two ways it's been a run, right? Tell me what some of those, maybe I might have thought about it differently, or if I had it to do over, something I might have been, maybe I would do it a little bit different. What are your lessons learned if someone's starting today?
The biggest thing that you really notice is don't get too tied in to the result of a singular decision, right? I love this book by Annie Duke, and it's Thinking in Bets, right? It's this idea that all of our lives are these culmination of small bets, like with as much information as we have handy. So yes, a lot of people look at hindsight as being 2020 because they're looking at, well, if it's exactly what happened back then happened again, then I know exactly which way I would go because I know the future. My crystal ball's a little fuzzy sometimes. So I have a hard time looking at that particular decision and saying that decision in itself, removing all other factors, if that was a good or bad decision, right? I think the hardest part for so many entrepreneurs is they look at the randomness of the world as, oh, well, then that's my fault. That's my bad decision. I have to lay in it. Like me starting during COVID, that wasn't a calculated decision where I knew I shouldn't have started during COVID. That's a conversation of, well, mistakes happen and now we have to pivot. Right? We play the cards that were dealt, right? So there's only really one thing that, well, the two, being able to separate your decisions and the results as being good or bad versus really diving down on whether or not your decisions were found in a positive place, right? If there was some factual information behind what you're dealing with. Now the second part of that conversation is, what information are you utilizing? Are you utilizing all the information that you currently have with the experience that you have in whatever area or ever field that you're in? Or do you take some of the time and get to know more of your industry, whatever that industry may be, and start leaning on other people's experiences, their logic, their thought processes to make sure that you're temperature checking yourself, that you're verifying that what you're doing isn't just a series of the book unfortunate events. Well, the other side, a series of fortunate events that just so happen to lead you where you are, and being able to double check that with great people, with experience, with knowledge, with a positive outlook on life has been the biggest piece. So one, don't get so locked up into what the evidence of what happened was, right? Whether it was good or bad. And number two, utilize amazing people to help drive that narrative and drive your better understanding, to learn how deep the water really gets.
Yeah.
How did you balance like learning the industry in Houston? Because I imagine Houston and Texas, even like the West Coast, is so much different than the East Coast. So how did you balance leaning on people who knew the market that you were in versus just knew the market in general and ran great agencies?
And I think that's and it's It's a great question. And the reason for that is not every piece of information when received is coming from a good place or a knowledgeable place. Right. Someone may tell you that, you know what, I'll give a really good example towards that. I was sitting down having a conversation at one of these events here and around, and there was a person speaking on stage that was a 25-year independent agency. All right. And he was talking about how he got started and how you should go out there, whatever you need to do, however deep of a hole you need to financially put yourself in, do it because it's all worth it in the end. Go like second, third mortgage the house, sell as much as you can, get yourself down to where this is what you're going to do and make it happen. And afterwards, I get to have a conversation with him, and he's actually talking to a young lady about her journey. She says, "Hey, I'm looking to start my own. This is a dream of mine and my husband's for a while. Hey, what's the best way to go about it?" His phrasing was, "No MGAs. You don't need anybody else. Bet it all on yourself and go into as deep a debt as possible." And I kind of stopped him. I was like, "Well, I know I've heard you say that on stage, but I just wanted to make sure." Quick question. I looked at her and I said, "Can you tell me a little bit, like how much money do you need to like live your life?" Right? She says, "Well, actually, the reason why I'm here is because it was a dream of me and my husband, but my husband did pass." Right? And we have 3 children. So right now, the minimum I need about $5,000 a month to be able to survive for my household, right? To pay for all of the expenses, to pay for the house, pay for my cars, to pay for my kids going to school." And I cursed this person out to high heaven, the man that was telling her to go into as deep of a debt as possible, because the advice that was given was done so with ego involved. Like, hey, look at how I made it. Look at how I got where I needed to get, and not on where this person was coming from. Right? Sure. This single mom that is trying to make it and trying to figure it out. And even more so, he was on like the northeast side of things. Let's call it just Maine or whatever the case may be. And they had no idea of how difficult this process of agency ownership would be, trying to do so in a hard market with no insurance experience and just a lot of funds from some deeper pockets that are earning interest.
Yeah. You have to know context of where this information's coming from. Context is there's a quote, "Don't take advice from people where you don't want to be." And she doesn't want to be in debt. So why would she ever not only does she not want to be in debt, she doesn't have the privilege of making that decision given her situation. I fully agree. You have to take some things with a grain of salt. And actually in our industry, it's easy for someone like me to have a mic or someone else to have a mic and not know the context of where their perspective is coming from in order to be able to weigh those things. So it's a great advice to basically, before you just listen wholeheartedly and follow someone because they've have 20 years of experience, you got to know where they're coming from and what their perspective is, and does it match your own? So, Charles, I get some of it comes from the people who are standing on a stage, but who are some people or relationships that you did rely heavily on as you were trying to navigate building McDade Insurance? Like and what types of relationships were impactful to you?
Got you. And the biggest thing there is finding and meeting great people. And at times it happens when you would least expect it. Right? There's a reason why people spend as much money as they do to go to networking events or to take extra time out of their day, because those interconnected webs have a strange way of tying themselves together. So one of my favorite ways to meet people is through like awkward relationships and maybe having to yell at a couple. So one of my favorite people that I met during my Liberty days was actually Taylor Dobby. And the way that we met was hilarious because it wasn't at an industry event. It wasn't at a talk that he was doing at the time, right? This is all the way back when Soup was tiny. I mean, we're talking about like a couple thousand, and Insurance Soup is a huge, it's 57,000 people now, a Facebook group on that's available for everyone if you're an agent, right? No suits are hiring people in there, so you're able to really get down to the nitty gritty of everything. But I actually met him in a firearm community. It had nothing to do with insurance, had nothing to do with, we were just sitting there, and for 2 years, this is back in 2015 or so, I believe is when I signed up. No, 2014 is when I signed into Insurance Soup the first time. But I actually met him trying to buy different firearms, and me and him were going back and forth for a year and a half, 2 years, where I was trying to win this one and buy this thing, and he was trying to do so well. And it's just me and him commenting back and forth. Well, after about a year, he puts a message down there. He says, who the hell is Charles McDade? And what is it that you do for a living? And why do you keep winning? Why do you keep winning every firearm that I want to have? And I responded back. I'm like, hello, I'm Charles McDade. I'm a sales rep for Liberty Mutual, and I win them because I want them more than you. And 20 seconds after I send that, he hearts it and sends me a friend request, right? And we have a good dialogue back and forth where he says, hey, I don't know if you've been in Insurance Soup before. It's a great exchange and melding pot of ideas. I think that you'd have fun going over there. Hey, but listen, sooner or later, I know you're captive now. You're making good money now. But sooner or later, there's going to come a time where you're going to want to become independent. And when that day comes up, can you do me the favor of giving me the last at bat?
Yeah.
And fast forward 5 years later into 2020, we of course have had a good amount of conversation since then, a lot of ribbing each other since then, and a lot of sharing of some different ideas since then. I made sure when I was on my journey to find my own agency, I wanted to do exactly as we talked about, collect as much usable, contextual information as possible. So I found 6 or 7 different MGAs that I wanted to look at, which is why it took me a little longer than 2 years to actually make that jump and transition, because I needed the foundation of my agency to be built on something strong versus me going to an MGA that their main goal is to sell themselves to someone else. So I sit there with them. I go through all 7. I get their contract. I verify it. And then I talk to Dobby about the possibility of going independent and what that would look like. And just as he promised me 5 years earlier, we had a great experience, and we were able to actually start working together. And I've become a CIA agent because of that. So that's a huge relationship where you talk about the 2 things: where you find people may not be where you expected them to be, and then the necessity of having multiple minds and pulling those in different places. I mean, specifically, like Carey, like me and you met each other at a One City World Tour event.
Yeah.
And another great person that has meant the world to me was who actually introduced you. This is some years later. I actually met Chris Paradiso, and he is a ball of lightning. Right. And in everything and every way that he does it, he is high positive energy with a lot of love and care for those around him. And that experience of being able to meet you through another great connector like Chris, and he's someone, to speak on him quickly, one of the absolute best people that I have been grateful and blessed beyond any knowledgeable measure of why he doesn't have to deal with anyone, right? When your agency's been around for as long as it has been, he could hermit himself out and just hide away. But the fact that he chooses effort and positivity and giving back to different generations, to different people, to different walks of life, it's amazing. And he has been one of the great connectors of my life that I can kind of speak to. And that wasn't money related, that we didn't exchange anything along that. It was just good people consistently looking and praying for other great people. And I hope that ties in a couple and answers as much as possible there. There's just been so many people in different regards.
I think it's so incredibly important, though, when you're trying to do this, not trying to do it alone. There's 40,000 independent insurance agents in the country. And The reality is they all look and feel different. They all might go about it differently, but they have the same common core. They have the same common desire to help their clients, protect their clients' needs and make sure that they are serving their clients and providing what they need. But they might all do it differently. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, and there's certainly not an instruction book that you can come to. But when you lift your head up and you look around and you understand the context by which other people are providing advice, it can be magical. It can be pretty impactful. And you mentioned two people. I mean, Taylor Davy might be one of my favorite, most unlikely people that I absolutely adore. I will tell you, maybe I shouldn't put this on a podcast, but I'm going to. But those people are very similar, but very different that you just mentioned. So Chris Paradiso he's also been very instrumental in my life in connecting and supporting, being an advocate. I met him because I wrote an article about my daughter. He has a magazine and he reached out to me because I did some kind of social post about my other daughter who is on the autism spectrum. And he said, "Hey, would you write an article for, I want people in the industry talking about their family and talking about the impact of living with people or raising a family that special needs has impacted." And that's how I met him. It's the craziest thing. Like, it had nothing to do with insurance. Taylor reached out to me and, he's like, sees my name everywhere. And, he reached out to me, him and Mike, and I felt like I was on an interview, and I thought that I like absolutely and holistically failed my interview when I got done with their call. And they've ended up becoming like some of my favorite people. But it's just so interesting how by being open and connecting and taking the time to get to know people, how much they've broadened my perspective. Both of the people that you mentioned, and I'd have to put Michael in there as well. Like, you can't have Taylor and Mike are kind of one and the same for me, but
yin and yang, yin and yang.
yeah, absolutely. It's just amazing. But don't put your head in the sand is the advice I would tell you, is look up, because there's so many people that, whether there's a business transaction or not, they're willing to help you because they want the entire industry to succeed. Like, that's what Chris is all about. He wants to elevate the industry. So I could talk to you forever. And honestly, we have talked forever. Like, you and I have all kinds of conversations, but I want to do a rapid fire one. How about that? What is the top 5 decisions as an agency owner that you think agency owners should stay laser focused on? Because there's a million decisions in the day, but what are the top 5 most impactful decisions that you made to get you from where you are to where you started to where you are now? Let's hear those.
So I would say the first thing first is connecting with the right MGA. Right. And some people, MGA is a dirty word for whatever reason, that there's an assumption because of this, because of that, vice versa. At the end of the day, especially being someone located in Houston, where access to carriers is thin, right? And there's a knowledgeable or a specific kind of 3 to 5 year cycle that Houston kind of goes into. And depending upon when you start, you might be unlucky enough to get hit by a huge hurricane, or get hit by a couple of tornadoes, or whatever the case may be. If I was only just myself, starting up an agency, spending all the money, doing everything I was doing, and I did so, and COVID happened, without the backing of a good MGA, there is no way I would still be in existence today, because those carrier relationships got really tight, really difficult to navigate extremely fast. And sometimes those carriers will tell you their own song and dance, and they know that a lot of the reason why they're in the position of lack of retention or lack of relationship is because of decisions that they're making top line level. They just want to push on the salespeople or the agency owners to get that right. So that's number one, having a good relationship, a good foundation of an MGA to help you navigate that and walk through it successfully. My second thing would be get knowledgeable. Right? To Carey's point, get your head out of the sand. We have to hurry up and get in and out of there and be able to have a better sense of the context of positive decision making. If you're a person that is starting an agency, you can talk to other agency owners that are starting, but we're all the blind leading the blind. There is a necessity of realizing that everyone that is married has a very similar value system, very similar decision-making pattern, right, as other long-term married people, right? So if your goal is to be married, or if your goal is to be an entrepreneur that is long-running in the agency, start finding friends that understand and value longevity, and let that context permeate all of your decisions moving forward. Right. So that would be my second, is finding individuals that understand that context, that are at a place that you would like to be, and focus specifically on the decisions and how they make those to get themselves successful. The third thing is, and I know that on your list, Carey, this should probably be number one, right? But understanding your numbers is an absolute requirement, right? If you are a business professional that can understand not only their balance sheet, not only their profit and loss, but also your retention rates and what that means as far as for crafting a contract for other salespeople, you'd be surprised if you're outlining your contract incorrectly, you can push people into rewriting business because you forgot that that's not actually new business. And surprisingly enough, that's something that I've seen, and I don't know, Carey, if you've seen this before as well, where if a salesperson changes a carrier from one carrier to the other, the agency would repay a new business number.
Sometimes, but typically not. That's a retention. It's just being rewritten to somewhere else. Like, that's crazy.
It's bananas because there's some agents and some agency owners that are hands off. They are just happy to look at the report at the end of the month. All right, hey, let's which one says new business next to travelers? Let's pay that commission, right? It's being very hands away. So if you're not someone that is willing to get into the nitty gritty of not only the financial side of your business, but also the business side of it, please understand you're not a good salesperson that decided to own a business, right? You are a good salesperson that decided to quit their job of being a good salesperson and become an owner.
100%.
And that is
true.
massively different.
Yeah. And you got to want to do that, or you got to hire the people around you to do that for you. Like, that's the only other option, you know? But I will tell you, that whole rewrite new thing gets a lot of people in trouble and leaves a lot of money on the table when you sell your agency and that's corrected. You know what? I actually do an analysis of what impact that could have inside an agency just for having dirty data and not knowing it. I totally agree with you on that %. Yes.
Absolutely. That it's strong, it's necessary. And I wanted to combine those two things into one because, and I joke about this, someone else that I've had the love and pleasure of actually being able to build a positive relationship with, like Taryn Moore, right? Me and him have some offline conversations all the time, and we'll just text each other, hey, kill the hustler. Right. And we got so used to being a bit younger for the industry, being the person that was selling everything. Right. And in doing so, you're kicking the can of becoming a business owner down the road. And that was how we felt at the time, a failure in us to more readily invest in the ability to become an agency owner. It's like being a good chef and deciding to open up your own restaurant. It's like, okay, you're good at this, and now what you want to do is none of the cooking, none of the chopping, none of the like, you want to clean your hands completely. And that is a strong conversation. Now, number 4, when a lot of times, whenever you're trying to kick up your agency, you're doing so, and I'll say it this way, as like a spurned lover, right? like many times it's because you were at, the Allstate or Farmers or State Farm, and you just didn't like that they didn't have the right products or this and that. So you're like, oh, well, I'm going to show them. Right. And you do a bunch of things that put you in a very bad predicament. And one of those is when you're outlining how to start, outline what the finances are for yourself. Evaluate not only your financial needs, but if you're taking on a partner or you're wanting to walk through the process of maybe partnering with another agent or a friend, family, like however the conversation may lead you, if you have to be willing to get down and dirty, and kind of going back to the original trivia question, do you know the finances, the values, the mentality of the people that your agency is getting married to? And I'll be blunt here. I actually talked to Carrie about a couple of situations of me evaluating a partnership, right? And in doing so, it's very apparent, very fast, that if you aren't looking at what your business needs in the long run, you can put yourself in a position of taking on debt or relationships, partnerships that do not serve the agency's goal. And the worst thing that you can possibly have is a divided vision and a divided focus. And that would kind of be my number 4.
Well,
I don't know if I need to clean that a little bit.
No,
No,
I
it's
think that
perfect.
kind of ties
Absolutely
into your
perfect.
number 2 as well. Like, surround yourself both with friends, acquaintances, and partners who are aligned on the same goals, have the same mindset that you do.
And how we ask those questions are different, right? So contextually, right? I'll use, so Mike, for example, Mike Strumso, I bounce, he's a great person. He's owned his own agency. He does a lot of help for agents across the US. I have bounced ideas off of him because he's a world of knowledge. He has gems, nuggets, and diamonds that he'll pepper into your life if you're willing to receive it. And again, one of those people that was given the opportunity to meet me in the first place because of Chris. And I just want to shout this out. When I ask Mike a specific question, he doesn't answer it as an agency owner that just started his agency 2 years ago. He answers the question as, wait, what are you trying to do? Right? How fast are you trying to do it? And what's your risk tolerance? Right? Because that's going to change the answer of like what it is that's going to happen. So what I found myself doing, especially early on, was I would ask questions with a bit of a lot of myself in it. Right. So I would ask questions like, hey, well, what matters the most for you? It's like, oh, well, running an agency, or, hey, growing and learning as much as I possibly can. Well, great. I'll take that for face value. But if you ask someone deeper questions, right? Like whenever you first start dating, you kind of ask, well, what's your goal? Where you want to go in life? Where do you want to live? And then you start realizing whenever they said, oh, I want to be an astronaut, but they haven't started school. Well, obviously, these things are not going to match themselves up. Totally. Same thing for partnerships. If you start asking just the questions that you would be able to answer, because of your own context, you're letting your rose-tinted glasses shift you away from actually learning about people. So asking and kind of leaning on other individuals that can ask a question. So I spent a lot of time in trying to evaluate a partnership, right? And trying to get that started, trying to figure out what that would look like. And again, this is where I actually asked Carrie to help me out a little bit with. And we had 6 or 7 meetings of trying to outline not only what we were doing, where we were going. And there was a statement that brought so much understanding to where I was, because I didn't have the context to understand it before Carrie said it. She said, I was trying to figure out why there was so much misunderstanding in this relationship, why there was so many things that weren't making sense, and trying to get something kicked up and rolling as far as for a partnership. And she got quiet. And I don't know if you remember this, but it meant everything in the world to me. You said, Charles, what if they're not trying to understand? And in that moment, you changed everything about what this agency could mean for my children, my employees, because that question made me truly see that the goal here wasn't understanding. It wasn't alignment. It was a one-sided pull. And I'll say it here on the podcast. I thank you every holiday. I hug you every chance I can see you because in asking the right questions, you've elevated my family's ability to survive this crazy entrepreneurial journey. And it's why having, and again, Mike Strumso speaks this all the time, even leaders need coaches, right? Like they need that, right? And you were a coach for me that if I didn't have, I don't know what my life would look like right now. And publicly out here, etc., I want to thank you for that because it changed everything for me. And I know that's a rough and tumble number 4, but that's where we're sitting.
Well, we're going to stop at 4 because I think you did a mic drop, which I very much appreciate, Mr. Charles McDade. And I think there's also, you never know the power of your words. You know, you never ever realize the whole power of your words. So I appreciate that. If you're an agency owner and you're listening to this, here's my point. Reach out to other agency owners. They have experiences that you can learn from. Charles is one of the most approachable people you'll ever find. He has an incredible network of people that helped him. I guarantee you he's going to help you too. So I want to thank you for being on the show and for being super meaningful in our lives. You know what? Trusting us to actually work together is some of the things that I am grateful for every single day of my life. So if someone wants to reach you, we're going to put all of your information in the show notes. And I'm hoping that we have you on yet again to talk about many, many more topics, my friend. But thank you for playing my trivia game and thank you for sharing your journey. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carey. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you for just sharing a little bit of time. I appreciate you.
All right.
Appreciate you.